Hey guys, it's your best friend Kenny. Don't worry, we're about to jump right in. I just wanted to get on here real quick and say welcome back to part two of the Choosing Joy episode. We released back to back episodes to give you guys a little bit of a pick me up from the last week's delay. So, hope you guys are enjoying the two-part series so far. I just wanted to remind you that if you have not already, please go and follow me on at Carved Wellness on Instagram. I believe that is our only social media platform right now. So at Carved Wellness on Instagram. Oh gosh, we also have a YouTube page where you can also listen to all of our recordings there as well. So feel free to go ahead and subscribe and drop down in the comments and leave a comment. But I need you guys to send me some DMs because I definitely want to hear from you. I want to get feedback from you and I want to be able to shout you guys out. So definitely hit me up on IG. The only other thing I wanted to make sure I told you guys is that we are going to be doing a real live launch of the podcast. It's going to be coming up in May. I will drop the actual date and time once it gets closer, but stay tuned for the full on launch of the Crafted and Carved podcast. All right, guys, let's jump right in. So, like I was sharing with you guys, I was brought up in a Christian environment. It was church, Christianity, every day, 24/7, 365. And I have a lot of thoughts about that, but most of them are good, right? However, I definitely think it created or it provided the platform for toxic positivity in a variety of ways. And I don't want to intrinsically tie the Christianity into toxic positivity because that would insinuate that toxic positivity comes from the Bible, and that is not true. I definitely want to dive into that a little bit later and explain, but I'm just sharing you guys my background and where I've come from. I definitely attribute some of the toxic positivity to some of the principles that were misstated, misrepresented, and honestly used in a manipulative way by certain people who were given authority in my life at the time. And toxic positivity definitely came from a lot of those spaces, primarily from another term which is similar to this one, which is called toxic Christianity, which some of you guys are gonna say I'm blaspheming, but yes, there is such a thing as toxic Christianity. It's just a twisted version of biblical principles that creates a toxic mindset, but that is rooted and that people attribute to Christianity. So basically, like for example, racism, using the Bible as an excuse to promote racism because people in back in the day were not supposed to associate, like Jews for example were not supposed to associate with like Samaritans or foreigners, right? Which it's that, I mean, the Bible goes so in depth about how that is like not okay. But a lot of times people will use that as a reason to isolate, or even for like a variety of other things. Just using the Bible and twisting it to support very problematic narratives. And so toxic positivity can come from and be a product of toxic Christianity for sure. But I want to dive a little bit deeper and not just talk in general terms about my relationship with my mom. And she's not like, and I've talked about her before, she's not a problematic person. She's not one of those like manipulative people that was like, that I was talking about. That's a whole different group. But as I shared, I grew up in a household with just her and I. And I think my mom, I don't know because I haven't really talked to her in depth about it. But I think my mom, she developed a toxic positivity mindset from the church, right? Um, I don't know if somebody told her that this is how she should be, or if it was just what she gleaned from her own experiences and time in the word and going to church and things like this, and then it kind of morphed into toxic positivity. But my mom, unfortunately, and I've shared this with her, is the number one promoter of toxic positivity in my life, even outside of all of those other things. Because my mom is the person and still is the person I talk to the most about everything that's going on in my life. And unfortunately, she always had a response that was it was not nurturing, and it was not and it also could have been, and I think about it, maybe her dad, my grandfather, he was military, and I don't fully understand that household dynamic, but I think there could be some things involved in that dynamic that also played a role in her being less nurturing and just more kind of hard and cold, but in being hard and cold also just kind of promoting and forcing this toxic positivity agenda. And so you can go back, rewind and listen to all of the different things that sometimes result in toxic positivity, and probably every single example of toxic positivity on that list was imposed on me by my mom um, and other people. So I'm not, again, not putting her out there to dry, but I'm just letting you know that because she was the main person I was around all the time, like she was the one who I talked to the most, she was the only person I really felt like I could go to talk to about my issues. And unfortunately, even while doing that, I did not receive what I thought um, I really needed, what I didn't realize at the time that I really needed in those spaces. And it's okay because I'm good, and we made it through, and she was doing the best she could, and she did a phenomenal job. So that's that on that. But yeah, go rewind if you want some examples of toxic positivity. I listed them from the article, every single last one of them I experienced. Boom. But I want to not, again, not focus so much on my mom's actions or inactions, and focus on, unfortunately, how her toxic positivity impacted me. Specifically, I have been for a really long time afraid, and still afraid, to embrace certain emotions, particularly those that are, deemed negative, like fear. I would get the God has not given us a spirit of fear, immediately, which is true. But it just really diminished not only my ability to communicate negative emotions with her, but it diminished my ability to even understand or process the feelings of fear and then speak the word of God over that fear. So anyway, some other things include that I became very resistant to help, which there's a little bit mixed in of just like her being a single mom. And, most of the time when you're a single mom, you become quite prideful, and, you don't want handouts and things like that. So that's mixed in. But I came resistant to help because I didn't know how to communicate when I was going through something difficult. I never wanted anybody to see me struggle, right? And then, of course, like I said, some of that is due to not wanting that embarrassment or the shame that may be associated with that, which I understand. I think that's absolutely understandable and fine. But it's also because I didn't want to be perceived or portrayed as someone who was wallowing in the negative, or a complainer, or someone who was unable to take the negative situation and turn it into a positive one. And so it's really difficult for me to, again, communicate that I need help, because in doing so, I would be communicating a negative thing, a negative, difficult thing, where I've been pushed to not do that and pushed so far away from that it is almost like impossible for me to do. Oftentimes I have felt very alone and isolated because I'm just kind of like on my little toxic positivity island. When things around me are not going great, because like I said, I'm not able to communicate fully that I'm going through something. I can talk generally. You may have even noticed on this podcast, like me alluding to some things that have been happening that are difficult, or me alluding to some, circumstances that I'm not like super proud of or happy about. But it's really hard for me to, and that's not just because this is a public podcast for all to hear. I have a hard time doing that with my friends. I have a hard time doing that with my mom. And I absolutely have a hard time doing that with my significant other, where I'm in a space where in this relationship, he really wants to be there for me and help me and make a space for everything that I'm dealing with. But I just don't know how to share the feelings that I'm experiencing. And so because of that, I end up feeling really isolated and by myself, even when I'm surrounded with people who love me and people who care about me and want to be there for me, which sucks. And because of that, I've lost a lot of friends. I lost friends because toxic positivity sometimes causes you to be inauthentic, right? You're going through all these different things, but you're constantly drowning your sorrows in positivity. I had a drinking problem for a really long time because I needed to be positive and I needed to drown the difficulties and the pain and the frustration. And it didn't matter how I did it, but I just needed it to not be at the forefront. And so I would lash out at friends because I would be drunk and just like, you know, out of my mind really, but harboring all of these things, negative things. And even when I wasn't intoxicated, sometimes I would lash out because I would be harboring all of these things. I remember even in high school, like lashing out at my high school boyfriend. He was like, "What happened to the sweet little Southern girl? Like, what is this?" And I realized, like, I can't do that. Like, I literally never gave him any indication that I had any problems with anything that he was doing. And now all of a sudden, boom, I'm like lashing out at him. But all because I could not communicate some of the frustrations, the disappointment, the negative things that I was feeling or experiencing. And this goes absolutely into, and like I said, well, yeah, I'm backing up because I lost friendships I see now, not because, and I mean maybe though it was time for me to move on from those relationships for other reasons, right? But I lost a lot of friendships because I was not showing up in those relationships in an authentic way. And it wasn't because I was trying to be fake. It wasn't because I was talking behind their back. No, no, not that's not what I mean when I say inauthentic. What I'm saying is I was not being authentic to who I really was in the moment, to the space that I was in, to the things that I was going through. I always found it much easier to run through a therapist who had no idea who I was, than to talk to the people who were actually in my life honestly and openly about the emotions that I was dealing with, the thoughts that I was having and facing. And because of that, when I did start to crack under pressure, really, really tough times, things, my personality might change. They would see some things like, what the heck? Maybe not me lashing out, but just some lower moments that resulted in some lower level behaviors that really would catch them off guard and throw them off and make them feel like, what the heck, who is this person? I can't deal with that. And I feel like, that is a scary thing. And I don't blame them for walking away. I don't blame them at all, because I wasn't showing up fully as myself. And I didn't really give them the choice, I'm all about the choice. I want you to choose me as a friend. But how are you going to do that if I'm not showing up authentically and I'm always letting you see me at my highest and I'm never letting you in at my lowest? And then when you do finally see it, it's just too late because now things have spiraled out of control and it's kind of a mess. And that is a habit, unfortunately, that I have perpetuated into adulthood and I'm still working on actively this very second as I'm sharing it with you. The other thing, I've made excuses for others. And just like the article was talking about, sometimes the toxic positivity pushes you into a space where I'm constantly, me specifically, constantly looking at the best in others and ignoring the negative effects that their bad traits have on my life and on me as a person. I have encountered abusive relationships, both verbally and physically, because I have ignored red flags and excused problematic behavior and behavior patterns in exchange for, if I just stick this out, I know that, this will work. I know. And so it's not just me feeling positive about the other person. It's me feeling so positive about myself that I believe that this situation is going to end in a positive result. And that's probably when we talk about the things that I'm going down in this list, and the therapy that I have gone to and the work that I've done on myself, that is probably the chunk of what I've worked on the most. And a little bit of the one I just talked about previously with showing up inauthentic in relationships. But there are still so many other things that this toxic positivity did to cause me to lack the control and the clarity that I needed to take charge of my own life and really love myself and give myself the happiness that I deserved and still deserve. So yeah, I've made excuses for other people time and time again and ended up in some terrible relationships, and stayed in some terrible relationships because of toxic positivity. And I have to even say, unfortunately, in those scenarios in my adulthood, who do you think I was going to talk to about my relationship issues? Well, one, I felt like I couldn't tell my mom everything, but the things that I was telling her were regularly wiped with a clean slate of positivity, love, and compassion, which, again, it's definitely coming from some biblical things as well. But I'm going to get into that and how, yes, compassion is necessary, but we also have to be good stewards of our mind, body, and spirit, and everyone cannot have access to it, especially when they abuse that access and literally become abusers of us. So, anyway, from all sorts of things, because I couldn't sit in the truth of what I was really feeling. And so, because I wasn't able to sit in the truth and the reality of what I was really feeling, I had to kind of detach from these things. The great example is in the abusive relationship when things finally, got to their worst. I began to detach, and I became somewhat of a shell of myself and just sat in the relationship, waiting for him to end it with me, pretty much, because I just couldn't come to terms with how I was feeling and that it was okay to feel this way and to know that it was, I had no ability to make sense of my emotions, let alone my thoughts about this anymore. So I just stopped thinking. I stopped feeling, if that makes sense. I stopped thinking and I stopped feeling. And I just became a shell and going through life day by day by day, just trying to do what I'm supposed to do. Just trying to get up, go to work, feed the dogs, walk the dogs, whatever I'm supposed to do. Whatever you need me to do, just tell me to do. I'm going to be there, show up to do, like, whatever you need. That's about the extent, but I lost touch with myself. And that is a very extreme example of when I got, felt disconnected. But I also found that I regularly disconnect in other situations as well, like in friendships. I don't really like to get too close, just close enough, but I don't really like to get too close. I don't really like the whole BFF thing. Or it's not that I don't like it, I'm fearful of it. I'm hesitant about it because I just don't know how to connect fully and embrace negative emotions about the relationship, embrace negative emotions that I'm going through and bring them to you in the relationship. So I have to kind of distance myself so that I don't, become too attached to you as a person. And the same thing happens in romantic relationships as well. And I really have to push myself to really, really connect, which is why it's hard for me to date multiple people at one time, as well as working on multiple friendships at one time, because it is actually a lot of work for me. It is actually a lot of work for me. I can't just walk up to you and feel connected to you. Unfortunately, because I have so many walls up, blocking my ability to connect. And that is extra transparent because I am still absolutely working on that, struggling with that, and trying to figure out how to navigate that. And so, because of all of that, this last section about breaking away from toxic positivity and learning how to choose joy, I am back to consulting this article from the medical news today. And yes, I'm going to share a couple of things, but I want you guys to really understand that this is still very much like I'm jam packed, stuck, blank in the middle of this. Like I am in the middle of this. Okay. But before I do that, I want to talk just briefly about what the Bible, really discusses when it comes to this. And I want to really encourage you that it does not promote what? Here I go. It's that time. My words. What are we saying? The Bible does not promote toxic positivity, okay? And I wanted to make sure that I reinforce that and I emphasize that. It does not promote toxic positivity. Toxic Christianity promotes toxic positivity sometimes, but the Bible itself, by itself, without human twisted interpretation, does not promote toxic positivity. And I'm just going to break down a couple of common things that I've encountered in the space, which is coming from the verse James 1, 2 through 4. It says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith works your patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing." Okay, that was King James. And I wanted to do that so that you understand. Yes, King James is taught in a lot of the churches. And so the whole count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations is the verse that literally everyone uses for toxic positivity. Toxic Christianity uses James 1, 2 through 4 to promote toxic positivity. That is their go-to verse. What I believe God's intentions were in giving us this count it all joy verse. And I don't feel like I really have to go too deep into it, but I want to say this. I don't think that it was intended that we count it all joy when we go through something difficult, meaning that we go through something difficult and every time we go through something difficult, we're not allowed to have any other experiences outside of joy. Everything joy, it has to be joy. Count it all joy, 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 joy. Like that's all. That's all we can do. That's all you get. Nothing else. So I think that is what unfortunately a lot of churches, especially back in the day, would promote, and I don't think that's correct. And that is my gut feeling about the verse. But also, I found a lot of comfort in reading the same verse from the New Living Translation, which a lot of people, will scoff at, the King James Version is, yeah. I don't know. I just, whatever. I love the King James Version, don't get me wrong, but I think that the New Living Translation, they spend a lot of time and work in translating these words to try to give the original Greek and Latin meanings to the terms from the text, the biblical text, just like they did in the King James Version. And now we have more technology and resources to do so. So I feel like we're getting closer and closer and closer to the accurate English interpretation of the original text of the Bible. And that is why I think it's great to move on from King James versions and utilize the newer sound versions as well, and or as your primary text, which that's another topic. But I definitely feel that this version, the NLT version, gives an incredible interpretation that I wanted to share with you. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." And I also want to just quickly read verse 5, which says, "If you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking." All right. So I just want to kind of talk about this a little bit because I tried to emphasize it when I read it, but if you didn't hear this translation, instead of saying "count it all joy," says "consider it an opportunity for great joy." And for me, it just hits the nail on the head. It drives home what I feel God's desire for us in our lives is not toxic positivity. It is for us to choose joy. Consider it an opportunity for great joy. The Bible is full of explanations about the fact that we have autonomy, right? We have the ability to choose for ourselves what we're going to do, what path we're going to take. And that is a beautiful thing. And I think that we have to embrace that. The Bible gives us what we should be doing. It tells us what we should be doing. But there are plenty of moments where, even while telling us what we should be doing, there's room left to choose. And in that choosing space, we get to choose how we choose. So it doesn't have to be apples versus oranges, pick oranges. It's not black and white. Sometimes it comes, like I said, with a journey, a process. Choosing joy is a process. And this verse literally says, in the NLT translation, "consider an opportunity for great joy," which means that you have the autonomy to take whatever troubles are coming your way and put them on a plate under a microscope and say, I could look at this way, or I could look at it this way. You know what I mean? And that consideration process is how we get into the choosing joy space. How do I get to where I can look at it in this light? How do I get to where I can look at it as an opportunity for great joy? And that is the choosing joy process that we've talked about. So anyway, I definitely think that faith and endurance are still very necessary. You have to have faith, you have to believe, you have to endure. And that is also a part of the choosing joy process. You are probably going to be going through it, still feeling the negative things, okay? You still have to have some faith and you still have to endure. But you can also do all of that while understanding and embracing that it is okay for things to not be exactly where you want them to be yet in terms of your emotional state and your ability to rest and joy fully. But just acknowledging that you're working towards that and trying to get to that space, I think is the best thing. I wanted to highlight verse 5 because it talks about how God will give us wisdom. And I thought that was really powerful because this is a verse about joy. So why are we talking about wisdom? And a little more context is that James is a slave of God. And I'm not sure, I'm not understanding fully the context of James and who he is and what they even mean when they say that he was a slave. but I don't necessarily know if he had the most amazing life, if that makes sense. And so when he's talking about having troubles that come his way or come our way and things like that, he's speaking from a place of disadvantage. He's speaking from a place of not having the best life and the best circumstances. But in even with that, still choosing Christ and still choosing joy, right? And so how do we get from choosing joy to wisdom? And I think that is because it says, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. And I think that that verse is in there because when it says consider it an opportunity for great joy, that consideration process is not an easy process. And like we were saying earlier, there are going to be moments where you are going to need to bring people into your space to help you get there, to help you choose joy. You're going to need resources, you're going to need uplifting, you're going to need encouragement, and you may even need God's wisdom so that you can find joy, right? So I just wanted to add that in. Another verse that I think is amazing for this topic to kind of begin the unraveling of the toxic positivity conversation and kind of reconfigure it, because it can't be toxic positivity anymore. It needs to be choosing joy. And like I said, the church, other sources, friends, family, even ourselves, we've done a great job of trying to take what we've read in the Bible and water it down to say that we just need to remove all negative thoughts and no negative thinking and get rid of negativity and don't feel anything negative, and negativity is bad, and if you are thinking that, then you're bad and you're doing Christianity wrong, right? But I want to give you guys two more, I guess one more verse actually, to help you to see that that is not God's will for us as Christians, and that we do have a choice, and that it is an ongoing process. There are so many examples actually in the Bible that I just, don't have the time. This is absolutely most likely going to end up being broken into two separate parts. So this is probably part two. And if you're listening, hey, thanks for coming back. But we definitely could take some more time to dive into the Bible and really look at some stories and lives of certain people who lived we just read the book of Psalms. David is always like, God, oh my God, this is horrible. I feel like this, and I feel like the world is ending. I feel this sucks. I feel horrible. I'm with sorrow. I'm with pain. And we see much more of that. We see much more crying out to God in sorrow, in horror, in frustration, and in anger than we see of, people just waking up with a positive outlook and excitement and happiness. And the other thing that we don't see is God reprimanding any of them for those feelings or feeling that way. What we usually see is God being just his heart being heavy for those things, and then coming to the aid or the rescue of those individuals, right? So maybe you can read that in your own time. Book of Psalms, David is a great one to go to, but there are plenty of others all throughout the Bible. But I wanted to give you guys this one verse because I think it is a quick but helpful way to also see that I don't think that toxic positivity was God's plan for us as believers. And interestingly enough, it comes from the book of Psalm. It is Psalms 30 and 5, 30 verse 5, which is another popular one, but people don't always fully embrace what is actually being expressed in this verse. And it says, for his anger lasts only for a moment, and his favor for a lifetime. Weeping may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. Now, this verse is also used for toxic positivity, but I want to flip it for you guys like I did with the other one. And this is the NLT translation, but the other translations read similarly. But I want to flip it for you guys because I want you to really understand, that the previous verse before this one, verse 4, is actually talking about God. right? That's why it starts off saying his anger only lasts for a moment, his favor for a lifetime. It's talking about how the people of Israel shouldn't be dismayed about bad things that are happening in the land, because his anger only lasts for a moment and his favor lasts for a lifetime, right? And then it goes on to say, weeping may last through the night, but the joy comes with the morning. So what I really think is going in this verse, right, is this verse is actually just giving us another something to mirror and parallel so that we can understand the love and the favor of God, right? Weeping is only temporary, joy comes the next day. And so that's kind of how it's used, I believe, to show us how God is. Like, he's only upset for a little moment, and then the next day he's forgotten it, and he continues to show his love for us through his favor. And I really think that that's what's happening in this verse. But if we just jump to that last part, weeping may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning, which so many people do, and they use it to promote toxic positivity. Even with that, I think that it's subjective, because weeping may last through the night, but joy comes with the morning. It doesn't necessarily mean, that I need to find joy right away. It doesn't necessarily mean that after I've had a night of crying that I'm going to wake up and feel amazing and better, right? I think what they're really trying to get at, again, because of the example that they used in the beginning, talking about God's anger only lasting for a moment but his favor for a lifetime, is just that sorrow is temporary, okay? And it's not always going to last. But the joy that God gives is always available to us. It's always available for us to go and grasp. And I really think that that's what that verse is trying to give. That's what's on my heart, and that's what I believe. And so if you have a different approach or understanding, I totally get it. But I believe that God, his example of love to us, doesn't require us to come to him with perfect understanding about life and without fear and without stress and without frustration. No. It's just to give us access to the joy that he has, and to know that we only have to cry but for a night. But if we do cry for more than one night, that's okay, because it's still temporary. Whether it lasts for one night or 25 nights, that's still temporary. It's never permanent. You will never live a life of permanent sorrow based on what this verse says. And I think that's the main takeaway. So I just wanted to express those to you guys to encourage you. And like I said, there's several other verses throughout the Bible, in Psalms, and depictions of individuals who have gone through difficult times, where I think that it's not about those individuals forcing themselves into joy, but allowing themselves to embrace God, who is the giver of joy, and just understanding that we don't need to be seeking out joy for ourselves. We can, but we don't really need to. We should really just be seeking out God for that joy, because he's the giver of joy. It's the concept of making yourself happy versus doing things to create the happiness. Making yourself happy could literally be anything. It's way too broad. That could be drowning yourself in alcohol because it produces positive endorphins. Same thing with sex and weed and drugs, okay? Because happiness is literally a feeling, and it's fleeting and it's fading. But if you're doing things to create happiness, that is usually more so tied to, fostering positive environments, being in positive spaces with positive people, reading the word, listening to sermons, reading books, listening to positive music, things that create actual happiness, the noun of happiness, not the feeling of the fleeting no. So anyway, I hope that's a little bit helpful to you guys. Like I said, I wanted to jump back to the article real quick because I wanted to share a few things that the article shared about how to disassociate from toxic positivity, free yourself from toxic positivity. A few of the ways that you can begin that process, start with embracing that negative emotions are normal. Negative emotions are a part of the human process. It is a part of life, and they are honestly an important part of the human experience. You can also begin to identify and name some of your emotions instead of trying to avoid them. If you've ever been to therapy, you may have seen or encountered the emotions chart where it lists all the different things, and then you begin to realize how so many of us push our emotions away that we don't even realize that there are more emotions than happy, angry, sad. Okay, there's so many other things. And then when you allow yourself to identify them and name them, then you can sit with them and face them a little bit better because you realize they're not that scary. They're just emotions. And so then you don't have to avoid them. You can also talk with your loved ones, your friends, your people who you can trust about your emotions. Talk to them about the negative feelings. You'll absolutely need to be careful and cautious about the people you choose. Make sure that these are people that you trust, but also people that fully support you and that are willing to validate your feelings and emotions. For example, validating your feelings looks like when you tell somebody, hey, like I'm just not feeling that great right now about my body. When I look in the mirror, I feel fat and ugly and I just hate it. Okay, now that's harsh. And if I heard my friend saying that, I would immediately want to tell her how beautiful she is, that she shouldn't feel that way, that that's crazy, right? But before I do that, I've been practicing validating the feelings, right? So saying, "Oh my goodness, baby girl, that I hate that you feel that way. What's making you feel that way?" Okay. And then also, well, it's totally understandable to feel that way. There's a lot of pressure right now in society, a lot of things on Instagram, a lot of things going on that cause us to look in the mirror and feel um, like what we see back isn't the ideal version of who we are. And then if they welcome some additional comfort and encouragement and positivity, then you can say, and sweetheart, you are so beautiful. I mean, I can't believe you feel that way because when I look at you, I'm like, I want to look like you. But I totally get that because, like I said, it is hard. But I just want you to know that when I see you, I see a beautiful person. And so there's like, that's a lot, right? But a lot of times we run away from others' negative feelings because they make us feel uncomfortable. And when you're a true friend, when you're someone that really loves someone else and the person that is in your life, you will sit through that uncomfortableness with them. You won't be so quick to rush out of that uncomfortableness. You will join them in that uncomfortable space because that's how you're there for. That's how you really show support, is that you go into that uncomfortable space with them. You don't try to thrust them out of that uncomfortable space. Okay. You work with them to get out of it once they're ready, but you sit with them in that uncomfortable space. And so, right, I'm saying that as some things and tools that I need to do for myself in the people that are in my life, but also like those are the type of people I need as well. And let me be very clear. A lot of people do not understand this concept. A lot of people, this is too complex for them. So after you've heard this podcast, the good thing is you'll know that this is something that you really desire for yourself. And now you can start to share with your friends. Hey, like instead of you just brushing it away all the time, I really need for you to sit with me sometimes in this negative space. Not that I need to vent all the time, but I just need you to sit with me. Like, can we just not brush away the feeling so quickly? And if they really want to know, they'll talk with you and say, well, how do you want me to do that? And this is friendships, relationships, family ships, all of the ships. Okay. And that's really what I think is at the core of a really healthy and impactful relationship is a friendship, a lover, a sister, a brother, a mother, a father who sits with you in the uncomfortableness that you're in the moment. You can also, reach out to a therapist and find some other areas of support outside of just talking. Support from friends and family too, outside of just talking, like them bringing you into positive environments, asking for a friend to take you to church, asking for a friend to take you to a therapist, asking for a friend to take you to, a seminar or something encouraging, positive, out a day out in the park, just whatever you need. And just avoid trying to have a positive response to everything that you say or that someone else says, because that is literally the number one perpetuator of toxic positivity. Is, like I said, instead of, it's okay to have a positive response, but don't let that be the immediate first thing you say that comes out of your mouth whenever somebody is expressing something, that is difficult for them, or that something is difficult that they're experiencing. And last but not least, this is huge, guys. Like, this one is like, I promise you, it's mic drop huge, right? Recognize that intense negative emotions often coincide with powerful positive emotions, such as when profound grief signals intense love. Now, this one really blew me away, because this is something I've never heard before. And maybe you've heard it, so you're like, girl, why are you tripping? But I have never heard this before, and I never thought about this before. And it was so freeing for me to really be able to say, you know what, to all those people who are going to be out there still saying that I need to be positive and don't embrace the negative, don't embrace this right here is what you throw in their face. Because if you're having a negative experience or emotion or reaction to something, it is 9 times out of 10 because you actually give a F. You actually care. You care, and that is amazing. The ability to care, like I said, I became a shell of myself so many times, or disconnected so many times, because I was told that I shouldn't have those negative emotions, when in reality, the negative emotions meant that I cared. The negative reactions meant that I cared. Now, this is not to excuse abusive behaviors that are imposed upon you by somebody else. I need to make sure I set that straight. If somebody is imposing negative things, go listen to episode 3. I believe it's episode 3, The Cycles of Hurt. That is not what we're talking about. Okay, go listen to the cycles of hurt and get out of that cycle. This is not always the case. No, it says sometimes coincide with powerful positive emotions. Negative treatment by another person, particularly an abusive partner or parent, not acceptable, and absolutely not coinciding with a powerful positive emotion. Okay, that's not the same thing. And so I want you guys to use wisdom and discernment. Like James 1:5 says, if you need wisdom, ask God. He will give it to you. Be mindful of all of the things that we've talked about over the course of all of these episodes in this foundational series, and you make good choices and discern with wisdom about the different things that you're experiencing. But I want to isolate, right, when just you encounter certain negative emotions. Maybe take notice of the fact that sometimes those negative emotions are stemming from deep care, deep concern, deep interest, passion even. And that is amazing. It's amazing to have passion and care and concern and feelings that are tied to things that you have deemed important and significant in your life. So, guys, that's it. We've come to the end of this episode, which is part 2 of the episode that has been an amazing journey, right? Talking about toxic positivity versus choosing joy. I hope you guys feel empowered to choose joy. I hope you guys feel like you know how to choose joy. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see where things go from here for you all. And I'm excited to see what is on the other side of your being free from toxic positivity. I think some takeaways, right, are just that we are so much better. We are so much better as individuals. We're so much better. We show up in relationships better when we are able to choose joy. Okay, toxic positivity can lead to isolation, anxiety, and depression. Just be mindful of that. Be aware, reflect, journal, talk to some people, get outside of yourselves, and understand that choosing joy is absolutely always a better outcome. More times than not, always going to result in the better outcome. You have to understand and know that your upbringing and the people that are around you and closely tied to you play a significant role in your ability to dismantle toxic positivity. So they play a role in your own ability to dismantle toxic positivity. So you may have to go back and understand your upbringing a little bit better so that you can understand how to break free from toxic positivity. But you absolutely have the ability to control who's around you right now and potentially perpetuating toxic positivity in your life. So the people in your upbringing not only can be the creators of toxic positivity, but they can also be the reinforcers of it and keeping you stuck. So you want to kind of take that and really hone in on the status of that in your life. Creating happiness and choosing joy is an ongoing process. I said that many times throughout this episode. And it's an ongoing process that has to be met with everyday intentions and followed up with dedicated actions. Boom, mic drop. And absolutely, lastly but not least, God is the number one giver of joy. He is the giver of all joy. And when you cling to Him, that is the number one way that you can choose joy every single day. All right, guys. Well, I know you're itching, which I feel bad because the recipe technically should have been for episode 9. But I'm just now getting around to telling you guys about it. So it's going to be in episode 10 because this is part 2. Or maybe we should do 9A and 9B. I don't think that's possible. So technically this is going to be episode 10. But that's okay. You made it to the end, and if you did, congratulations. I'm going to be dropping a link in the description for you guys to check out. This week's episode is a brown buttered honey salmon with roasted vegetables. Oh my god, my mouth is watering. And you can pretty much choose whatever vegetable you want. I am a huge fan of roasted green beans. Last night I did roasted Brussels sprouts. Like I told you guys at the in part 1 of this episode, I made this last night, not even remembering that I was gonna talk about it and share it with you guys today. So it was delicious. It's a home run every time. It's so quick. It's so easy. And you feel like you're doing something nice for yourself. And that's what these recipes are all about, is feeling like you have the ability to design something nice for yourself whenever you want. You don't always have to go and eat out. You definitely don't have to be putting a bunch of junk into your body. Absolutely not. So yes, the brown butter honey salmon with roasted vegetables. It's got a nice crispy skin on the bottom. Because we broil it instead of bake. And then if you do want to pan saute, you can still achieve that as well. So lots of fun little tips and tricks that I will drop in the recipe that you can find when you click on the link in the description of this episode. So I hope you guys will try the recipe out. It's so flavorful, so succulent, so delicious. You're going to love it. If you do try it out, please let me know or create an IG post and make sure you tag at Carved Wellness. Don't forget, please send me DMs at Carved Wellness. That's our IG page where you can reach out to me directly with questions, with stories, with an opportunity to potentially be featured on one of the episodes. I would love to feature your story or your comment on our next episode. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for staying locked into this 2-parter. That's never happened before, but there was so much information. This was near and dear to my heart. I'm working through a lot of the aspects that we talked about in this episode myself. And so I definitely felt like I needed to give it the due respect and time that is necessary. All right, guys, like I said, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this. And I will see you next time.